Sometimes the universe has a strange way of teaching you things and taking you on these journeys, and sometimes when you think your dream has been broken, a better one comes along, or something happens that you weren't expecting. The key thing for me and maybe for us is to never give up. Never give up until you take your last breath. Because life can bring some challenging stuff, but it can also bring amazing things. I have faith in that.
You gotta wonder, will I disagree or concur? Because it's deep dive time. Let's go. Mike's on. Hot takes ahead. Big bombs, bigger brain threads. Press play. Are you all aboard? Welcome to the track record. Let's have some fun now.
Hello, my dear listeners. Today we have Tom Spare in the house. Clap, 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 clap. Tom, would you like to introduce yourselves to my listener?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, thank you for having me on. My name's Tom Spare. I'm one of the podcasters on the Be the Change media network, and I do a couple of podcasts. I'm on the Political Dispatch with Sid and Lily, and then I also do my own, which is called Spare a Thought, where I interview people and organisations about causes, stories, things that they're working on that perhaps don't get much media coverage or are underrepresented or misrepresented by the media. And today I'm really excited to be talking about our subject, which is Coldplay. And I need to lift up mine as well. So there you go. Twinsings from different cities, of course, but yeah.
Different parts of the world as well, I guess. But oh my God, I'm
Parts of the world.
so excited for this one. So, little backstory as to how this interview came to be. Tom just saw one of my stories where I was like, hey, can anyone just let me know if they're Coldplay fans? And then I got to know your history with Coldplay, how you have been a fan for 20 years, if I'm not wrong now.
Yeah. Over 20 years, I should say. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Little background on me as to why I love Coldplay. So I have always, obviously, like any normie, so to speak, have heard their songs, all their singles, so to speak. But one of my friends is also big Coldplay fan. And when they decided to come to India, and it was one of their biggest shows, so to speak, she was like, you need to come with me. And I am someone who appreciates like the visuals, the message, and everything they come up with when it comes to their shows. So I was super excited to just get to know who they are as artists. So I'm so happy that I got to have someone like you to be on the show and get more insights into them as a band from a fan perspective. So let's just directly jump into it. I really want to know who Coldplay are as a band, how it's more than just Chris Martin. So my first question to you would be, if honestly, like Coldplay are one of the most streamed bands on the planet, yet some people still debate what kind of band they actually are. If someone has only heard, say, Yellow or Viva La Vida, what would you want them to know about Coldplay really as an artist, performers, and people as a fan?
Yeah, I'd say to sort of like ignore the headlines and the column inches that are dedicated to critiquing their sound and their style, and listen to their music, go and see them live if you can. And I think to see Coldplay is something completely different to simply listening to their music. And obviously, a lot of fans would say that. I mean, I'm also a big fan of Bruce Springsteen, for example, and listening to his music is one thing. Actually, going to see him live is another matter. But the story of Coldplay is, four British guys met at university in London. They loved music, and together they created an alchemy that has led to millions of albums being sold, record-breaking tours, and an approach to music that centers on celebrating love and people coming together. So that's my sales pitch to anyone.
That was a great elevator pitch. But no, honestly, hear it from someone who's not the biggest fan of Coldplay. I would still say their music somehow gives hope. I don't know how to explain it. It's hopium. And then seeing them live, it was a different experience altogether. They literally, like that experience pushed me to do things creatively, to have things in my control that just pushed me to be a better human. And I don't think there's an explanation in words to like explain that experience. Someone just has to experience it for themselves. But I'm very curious to know, how did you first discover them? Like, was there a song, an album, or even a line of anyone from the band saying something? Or was it a live performance that made you stop and think, like, oh my God, what they're doing here is something super special?
Well, I have to credit my oldest brother, who I mentioned actually before we started recording, Matt. And he's 13 years older than me. I've got two older brothers and then a step brother and stepsister. And Matt, in his when I was in the house I was growing up in, his room was just full of CDs basically. So I would when he went away to university or when he was off traveling or wherever he was in the world, I would often pop into his room and just pick an album and start listening to it. And I don't know how old I was. I don't know if I was in my early teens. It might have even been before then. And I ran my finger along the whole stacks of CDs, and they were all like organized into different genre. So you had like early hip hop, you had R&B, you had like everything, like rock, Motown. And then I sort of came across there's sort of like a sort of indie British section, I guess, and that had a lot of like Oasis and The Verve and all that sort of stuff. And included in that was Coldplay's first album, Parachutes. And my memory is, and I don't know whether this is correct, that I just sort of looked at the cover, which was sort of like a sun, I think, but like a sun globe, and opened it up, sort of leafed through the leaflet inside, and then started and then put the music on and just sat on his bed and listened to the album the whole way through. And that I did that with a lot of albums. Basically, I would just sit there. That was my education. I would just and obviously a lot of the songs went over my head, but I don't know, something sort of resonated with me really. Yeah.
Oh my God. One, I love the fact that you're a full album listener front to back and not just a streamer, so to speak. Two, I would like to meet your brother now because they're also a music nerd. And three, oh my God, it just made me realize that even Coldplay has gone through such a reformation in terms of how they distribute their music because, like, CDs, yes, that's like, now that you think about it, it seems like it was ages ago, albeit it was still like less than 2 decades ago. It's not like a lot of time has passed, so to speak, even in music world. But the world has changed so much since then, and we've come down to streaming, which gets me to my next question because Coldplay have gone through so many sonic eras, be it the music itself or how they distribute, from intimate sadness of parachutes to widescreen spectacle of Mylo Xyloto, and even beyond, honestly. What do you think is at the heart of their artistry that connects all those changes, even through generations at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have like pockets of different fans as well from different eras. I think, like all good bands and musicians, I mean Taylor Swift, isn't it? She obviously recently completed her eras tour, so she's got different eras. The same with people like Madonna and people that are able to reinvent themselves, or David Bowie, or you know, the great artists are able to do that. And I would say what sits at the center of their artistry. I saw Coldplay for the first time in 2023, and they came to Cardiff to the Principality Stadium, which is about 70,000 capacity, 65, 70,000 capacity, and it's normally home to rugby matches. So I've seen Wales Island play there, and it's absolutely incredible. It's a great venue, and it's right slap bang in the middle of the city as well, which is quite unusual for a lot of stadiums. Often they're quite sort of far out of the city. Um, And after seeing them live, like you said, I was on a high for a very long time afterwards. And I sort of wondered why that was. And I realized that seeing them was a culmination of all those years of listening and knowing that for every part of my life, there was a Coldplay album. So from the angst of like early teenhood through to university and the start of my sort of working career, you had Yellow and Clocks, Fix You and Paradise as the key moments in my life. These songs were there. And they really spoke to me in sort of different ways. And I suppose I'll give an example. Like in 2005, when X and Y came out, I'm dating myself a bit here, but I was in my early teens. I was about 13 years old, and I learned that that my dad had I wasn't I hadn't seen my dad for a long while, and I learned that he'd had a massive some health issues, and it completely changed his life. And that album sort of carried me through that really difficult time because I think X and Y came out in May, and that was around the time that I learned about my dad. So when I was doing my GCSEs, and then started into my A levels, their music then carried me through for like their music, like we're going to talk about later, Viva La Vida, for example. And then in my early university life, Mylo Xyloto came out. So these songs and albums were sort of the soundtrack to my life, I guess. And I think there's a Coldplay song for every moment, every emotion, all the cavernous lows and all the high peaks as well.
Oh my God. I that's why I always say pop music. Like eventually they did come down to good pop music. And I genuinely believe genres should not be that restrictive. And I absolutely love the fact that all the songs that they make, as you said, you can always find in their catalog a song that will fit in your life experience. For me, it was Fix You, for example. BTS covered their song Fix You, and I lost it even though I've already heard all these songs, just being recontextualized by the fact that one of your favorite artists love this song that you already love. So I think, especially for Fix You, Yellow, all these big numbers, so to speak, when it comes to Coldplay, everyone has a moment with that song. I have never met a person in my life who has not heard Yellow. So I totally get you on that. Oh my God. But
Mm.
I think that also gets me to the next question in terms of some people call them stadium rock for the masses, and others see them as pop band disguised as rock, as if like that's an insult. But as for fans, they are something deeply emotional. Which of those labels, if any, feel closest to how you experience them?
Yeah, I think that they're a difficult band to pin down genre-wise, and it really depends on who you talk to. So, like Chris Martin, the lead singer of Coldplay, will say their band is sort of soft rock, but they also play, you know, they also play live music for the masses. And their albums are a little bit difficult to place. And I think they're the best type of bands. They can't really be boxed in. So their earlier work, say like Parachutes or A Rush of Blood to the Head, are sort of one era. And then they started to, their third album, X and Y, which retrospectively has, I think, been very well received and the fans really love. Critically at the time were panned. It was a very difficult time for the bands. They were going through creative differences. Their creative director sort of left briefly for health reasons and then came back. And they were sort of making the album, I think, for they were doing the album that was expected of them. And then that started to change a bit with Viva La Vida. And I'll probably talk about this later about their process with that album sort of changed. So yeah, they're difficult to pin down, and I don't really know what I would call them. I'm not sure myself.
Let's just call them an emotion and live our days through. I guess they're an
Yeah,
emotion. Coldplay is an emotion.
yeah.
You talked about creative differences. It gets me to my next question. Chris Martin has often been seen as both Coldplay's biggest strength and the biggest vulnerability. I mean, that's the guy you always see in the front. So, as a fan, how do you see the balance between Chris's, you know, public frontman persona and the quieter contributions of Guy, Will, and Johnny? I mean, they are gorgeous people. I saw them live and I lost it. But as a fan, how do you see them not being two separate entities? It's not Chris and friends, it's Coldplay.
Yeah, I think so I was watching some stuff last night actually in preparation for this, and there was a interview with Melvin Bragg, he's like a BBC journalist, very famous BBC journalist, and that he interviewed the band, and it was around the time after Viva La Vida, between when they were finishing their Viva La Vida tour and they were in the process of making Mylo Xyloto. And that they had Will and Johnny, so the drummer and the guitarist, in Camden, near where their studio was, uh, sat in a bus shelter, and no one batted an eyelid. They were just walking by, and no one um, sort of asked them for an autograph or anything. It's the same with their bassist Guy. So, as you say, a lot of things center around Chris and his personal life. He married a famous actress in Gwyneth Paltrow, and he dated Dakota Johnson for a long time too. So he's always been like there or thereabouts, and he is the front man. He's a bit like, a sort of Mick Jagger or a Bono. He's at the center of things. But I think the band as a whole, individually, they're pretty talented folks, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to go out alone. And they admit this in their interviews, is that something different happens when they perform together. So Chris is sort of like the creative, energizing front man. Johnny is the guitarist and his best friend who backs his ideas. And then Guy, the drummer, and Will, the bassist, are the skeptics. So they're the ones that Chris needs to win over when he's got this idea that's come to him in the night. And I always think of a Leonard Cohen quote is I don't know where I the quote is something like, I don't know where the good ideas come from, and if I did, I would go there more often. And it's the same with what Chris Martin says, is that his music are gifts that come to him and arrive at the piano, and he starts playing them. But they're not necessarily the most they're not always good. It's not always good music. So you know Guy and Will are there to be the sort of like the gatekeepers to whether things get made, particularly Will. And then they have a fifth member, Phil Harvey, who is sort of Chris's school friend and the creative director of the band. And together there is like a synergy which keeps the band on equal footing through all the ups and downs. And they also distribute the money equally. So there's no one that's more equal than the other. There's sort of equality within the band.
When I first heard about that, I was like, oh my God. Because I'm a K-pop stan, usually speaking. And in there, you would see the most popular member would obviously, so to speak, get more money, because then they're getting the endorsements, they're getting the brand deals, and then they're face of Chanel, Dior, Celine, yada, yada, yada. So it was very refreshing for me to like find that out during my research, which by the way was mostly scrolling through reels, and like my algorithm did the deed. But the one way I saw my reels describe it, it's like Chris is like the younger brother who is super energetic and spritz of musicality, ideas and this and that. And the other three guys, they're like the older brothers and great musicians in their own right. They just have to hold him back and be like, buddy, can you calm down? That's how I saw it on my reels. And I kind of get that vibe to be true from what you're saying. But going back to their concerts, you know what? I came in for the spectacle of it all. I always saw reels across the globe where people are just bouncing around. They have those big, big balls, and then the crowd is just pushing those around. You have the goggles, the moon glasses, and it's so fun to look at. But when I was there, I mean, I noticed how Coldplay often weaves the politics and activism into their music and shows, from Fix You at their benefit concert to everyday life addressing global injustices. Then they're just zeal to be so sustainable that they just refuse to do it without getting their efforts out there, without thinking about it so much. Having Eliana on there as their opening act. Oh my god, that woman, by the way, I became a fan. Like, I went there for Coldplay and I became a fan of hers. But them having a Palestinian woman open for them in this time and era, and then them running it like Chris was running around with the pride flag. I can't tell you how, as an Indian queer person, I felt about it, because, oh my God, I'll spiral down. But as I said, politics is a very forced thought. It's not an afterthought. It's how they weave it into their music. So, as a fan, can you explain it to my listeners that how that becomes so important for musicians in general, but people who listen to such artists? Sorry, I went on a ramble.
No, no, it's good. It's good. I think it's a really it's a difficult balancing act in this era to for bands to be political and for there to be activism. But I don't think there is music without political activism. I think that music and political activism go hand in hand, and often it's the traditionalists, more conservative folks that want to resist the music because it offers people an alternative to their worldview. And you can think about Elvis in the 1950s and him being banned from, like, they didn't want him to be gyrating up on stage because they didn't know what that might do to the youth of the day, right? Or the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. Or you think about punk rock, or you think about Bruce Springsteen sort of singing about the working class and the dangers of war and all this sort of stuff. So politics and music are interrelated, particularly in the modern era, and it's transgressive, right? It's acts of rebellion, and Coldplay do a very good thing of being inclusive as well, which is difficult. And sometimes perhaps the fans want more. They want more active criticism of Israel, for example, in what's going on, the absolute horrors and bloodshed that are going on in the genocide in Gaza, and what's going on in the West Bank as well. But I think they would be undermining their message if they went with a particular group. And Chris's message is always we're one big band and believe in love, right? And that is such an important message at a time when so many people feel excluded. And their live performances are so celebratory of life and inclusive, that it's hard not to care. But when you come out of it, you might go in thinking about, I know I was going into their gigs thinking about all my worries, and I came out and I didn't sort of think about them anymore. It's not that I was kidding myself. I still had to get up and the next day and deal with whatever was going on in my head in my life at the time. But it energizes you. And as you say, the causes that they've supported, War Child or Live 8 or their most recent tour is ongoing. I mean, they've performed to over 12 million people around the world. And they've cut their carbon emissions by a huge amount in comparison to the last tour. They've got people on bicycles storing up energy for the next show and the kinetic floor. They use local support teams. They make sure they're based in cities for several days, so they maximize. They have an app when you go to the gig, sort of encouraging you to use public transport and trying to sort of capture that as well. And I think, yeah, there's always been the ethical side of them, and obviously they've headlined Glastonbury so many times, I think a record number of times. And again, with Glastonbury comes that eco message of, and that community message as well. I think it's really empowering for people, particularly young people who will, we're meant to look up to our politicians and to our leaders for inspiration, but that seems to be quite lackluster at the moment. I think in any era, really. I think we're probably kidding ourselves that there's very few people, I think, who really stood up on the podium and people we've believed in, and they've met their commitments that they've given in speeches. Whereas musicians tell a different story, a much more personal story, but then also a story of overcoming. And yeah, and I mean, Coldplay, they are, I mean, I suppose relatively privileged folks, but they also check their privilege too, and they support music and artists and the people that tour with them and the other music that they promote as well. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. My own response was a bit rambling, but yeah.
Get it, I get it. Oh my God. My first reaction to all of it was, oh my God, wow. And then when I came back, I still have goosebumps when the first time I saw that pride flag coming out of Chris's hands. I felt seen. And I have this video, oh my God, where he's just waving the pride flag out there, and then there's someone in the audience in this, like in the crowd, who has the Indian flag going about it. And oh my God, I cry whenever I think about it. I still have that video. And oh my God. So, like,
And then I have to remind myself, white man, British man at that.
men out there, they have a lot of privilege, they have so much money, but they show up as allies, and people do not realize how much it matters to people, especially someone as influential as them. It's beautiful, and at the same time, I don't know how to explain this. Oh my God. But that is why I always tell people, if you have the opportunity to go to a Coldplay concert, go. Don't ever, 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 ever lack yourself from that experience. It changes. I have been to a lot of concerts, honestly, but the way that Coldplay concert changed me as a person is not something that can be explained in words and has to be experienced by people. The hopium, as I say, is felt in my blood after that. Oh my God. We will keep on rambling if we started talking about the concerts, I think. So let's get back to the music itself. Let's talk about the world of Viva La Vida, or Death of All His Friends. Oh my God, that's quite a mouthful name for an album. Do you know the story behind this? The album name. Why did they name this like that?
Yeah, so I was again doing a little bit of research, and I need to find out. I've written it somewhere. I'll just try and find it. It's the paint the so there's a couple of things. The name comes from a Frida Kahlo painting called Viva La Vida. And she was an amazing Mexican artist who um, had a very tragic life and lived in pain for a lot of her life, but created incredible art, and that was sort of the name as well. And then the artistry on the front of it is all about not the French Revolution, but a French Revolution, because there's sort of been several, which was in 1830 to dethrone King Charles the 10th, I believe it was, to then replace him with a bit more of a constitutional monarchy, basically. So through the album, there is this undercurrent of revolution and empire, and the end of old things and the beginning of something new. Is basically the theme of that, and with that sort of revolutionary sort of undertone throughout. Yeah.
And I think you can feel it across the tracks, honestly. Now, I contextualize it in a way that Coldplay were coming off from the criticisms for X and Y, that people said that it's like somehow bloated or safe to pop C, so to speak. I don't know. I don't feel it that way, but still, okay. But then they worked with Brian and created Viva La Vida. And as you said, it sounds so revolutionary. Those undercurrents and themes are so potent in the music itself. So why do you think that this album became such a turning point in their career? As a fan, how do you see this album? What is your relationship with it?
Yeah, I think you do have to look a bit behind the scenes. So I was again watching a program about Coldplay, and Guy Berryman, their bassist, said, "I think we were trying to make a record that people expected of us, and we weren't trying to make a record that we were doing for ourselves." So referring to X and Y. And I think the fourth record, so Viva La Vida, we really kind of learned from that experience and decided that we would be making a record which was what we wanted to hear or what we wanted to do. And there was a sense of something coming together. And that sense of coming together was in part because they opened their studio, the Bakery, which is quite a sort of intimate sort of set up, a bit of a den in Camden, where they started their music. So they sort of went a bit back to the start thing. And then you mentioned Brian Eno. They chose him as one of their producing partners, and Eno has produced lots of Bowie, David Byrne, Talking Heads, U2, Peter Gabriel, Grace Jones. The list goes on, and he was sort of like the alchemist, basically bringing them all together. And he stopped making the band about Chris because he is the creative lead, and helped make space for the rest of the band to work on a collaboration. And I think you can feel that in the music. It's more of like a narrative based album rather than a series of songs that come together to tell a big story. It's each song sort of builds on the next, and you get a story throughout rather than being yeah, individually strong songs. And I think they've tried that since. I don't know whether it's worked as much as a story narrative, but this album is particularly effective, I would say.
I think it's so effective because of the subject matter as well, because it sounds a little darker, haunting, and even themes of death and afterlife would show up. When I think about this album, what comes to my head first is whimsy, but still somehow very nostalgic. And I honestly don't have any, string of thought that could just pull it in a one go. So if you had to convince someone to listen to Viva La Vida, how would you go about it?
Yeah, I'd say listen to the album in its entirety and listen to what it's saying. You know, there's a lot of lyrics in there about you know, God is in the houses, God is in my head, and all the cemeteries in London. I see God in my garden, but I don't know what he said. My heart, it wasn't open. So, a lot of it is about that battle. There's sort of religious undertones there. But then it's also like it's about getting people fired up. It's about thinking that empire and power doesn't last forever. And you can overcome. There will be costs to that. And I think that's what the album says. So it's good music fundamentally, but it also tells a really excellent story about the rise and falling of an empire, and then what comes next, and why revolution is important. And yeah, the songs like Viva La Vida and yeah, they I don't know. It's just a really nice mix of Coldplay. It's a little bit of a sort of look to the past, but also very much its own thing, and trying to do something new and quite inventive. Yeah.
Yeah. As you said, the cultural impact and how there's a lot of biblical imagery to this particular album, especially for the titled song, which reminds me because the first time I heard that song was from Taylor Swift, actually. She performed a cover of it. And then even throughout the years till now, I see so many other artists stick to that song. So, if you had to summarize the emotional or cultural statement of Viva La Vida, what is Coldplay really trying to say on this record in terms of its cultural context, as I said, but also how it has impacted other artists, and also what does it really personally mean to you? I think that's a lot of question
Yeah.
in one, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think the album speaks to the belief that everything must end, even the mightiest empires and leaders will fall. And in the end, we must seize the small moments we have. love those that are dearest to us, and do our best to reject those cycles of violence that consume our culture and have littered our histories. And I think the album was a turning point for the band's discovery of a new sound, a new style of exploration. But also, you talk about those sort of like political undertones, right? So when in one of their songs, Violet Hill, when the future's architectured by a carnival of idiots on show, you better lie low. So he's sort of talking about George Bush and Tony Blair, sort of the war on terror era. But then also, Death and all of his friends, you don't want to battle from the beginning to end, don't want the cycle or cycle revenge. Um, and every now and then I see a a video with Ursula K. Le Guin, and she says, "We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings." And that is the fundamental message, which I think comes from Viva La Vida.
I think there's no better sales pitch, so to speak, for Coldplay in terms of like if people are skeptical that hey, they are sellouts, they don't stick to genres. I think it's beyond that. It's the message itself. And oh my God. Geez, this is so overwhelming in a way that I didn't think it would be. But I honestly wanted that opportunity to talk about Coldplay beyond their concerts because at this point they have become that legacy act. They've been working for more than 20 years and their concerts are fun and that's it. That's how people know them. But I really feel like there's more to it. I have literally 1 minute left. So if you had a chance to tell Coldplay something, if in this world they ever got to see this, what would you let them know as a fan?
You're amazing. Keep doing the amazing work that you're doing. And I know touring takes a lot of effort and everything, but keep doing that. And we care and we love you.
Hand hearts for Coldplay always. Can you make it too? That will give me a good
Yeah,
thumbnail also. Yeah, yeah.
just about. It's a bit blurry.
It's okay. All right. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Tom, for doing this. You have no idea how much this means to me because I just wanted to like blurt out all my love for Coldplay and have someone at least understand it in this era of people just trying to box artists into something. I definitely feel Coldplay is not a band that you can do that to. So thank you so much for being on the show. I'll put down your socials and all the two podcasts that Tom has been working on so hard. Anybody, right now, go after this episode, of course. After this episode, go check out Spare Thought and the Political Dispatch. Tom will be here.
Cool. Thanks for being such a great host and love the show.
Thank you.